Lai Ching-te of the Democratic Progressive Party has won the national election in Taiwan. Lai was handpicked by the former president Tsai Ing-wen when he was the vice president. Meanwhile, the main opposition party, the Kuomintang's Hou Yu-ih, has conceded defeat in the election. Have a look at these images from Taipei, where the ruling party leaders address their supporters. The ruling party supporters can now take a sigh of relief as the nail-biting finale is inching towards its end. There were cheers and hugs as the results poured in and showed that the ruling DPP kept surging. The party has won more than 3 million votes in the crucial election. Lai took the lead early in the vote count and held on to it, keeping the KMT and the TPP candidates at bay. Lai Ching-te is set to become the next president of the island nation. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party has now clinched a third term. You can see the live visuals of the supporters of Lai Ching-te, who is now going to be Taiwan's next president. And now for more on this, we are being joined by journalist Adam Hancock live from Taipei. Hello to you, Adam. Now, the Democratic Progressive Party has won the national election in Taiwan. Take us through the latest.
Yep, just a short while ago, just behind me in the large crowd, he was addressing his supporters. It wasn't a landslide victory by any stretch of the imagination. It was fairly close, but then it became more and more evident that Lai Ching-te will be the next Taiwan president. He gave a speech to his supporters here a short while ago, said he's determined to safeguard Taiwan from continuing threat and intimidation from China and will maintain the cross-strait status quo. So fairly careful with his words. It was looking likely to be a victory when both of the opposition parties here conceded. And then we awaited the speech from Lai, which has just been delivered to a large crowd in a very celebratory mood. He won't become president until May, when his inauguration takes place. But now all attention will turn to Beijing and how they will react to this result.
Right, and Adam, the President-elect Lai addressed his supporters, as you mentioned, and vowed to defend Taiwan from China intimidation. Can you share more details on this?
Yes, well, he referred to the cross-strait tensions. He also referred to the fact that he thought that maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait is an important responsibility, and the government will use dialogue to replace confrontation and exchanges with China. He also referred to the fact that Taiwanese people had ignored some of the warnings and the threats that had come from Beijing about voting for Lai. Remember, Beijing are not a fan of Lai Ching-te. They've called him a troublemaker, a separatist, and they told voters that this election was a choice between peace and war. But with the DPP and Lai securing the presidency, it's the third term now where the president has been from the Democratic Progressive Party. Voters here are ignoring those threats from Beijing.
Yes. And Adam, what does this win mean for the future of Taiwan?
That's certainly the big question on everyone's mind now. Given some of the comments that China has made about Lai, it's difficult to see relations getting any better, particularly in the short term. We await to see the official response that comes out from Beijing and whether or not there will be any sort of military action. We've, of course, in the past seen military drills taking place around Taiwan when Beijing has not been happy with events here, such as when the former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan a few years ago, and Beijing responded with a series of drills. So we're going to await what Beijing say and try and look a bit more into that in the coming days.
On that, has there been any comment from China on the election results yet?
We're still waiting for that official comment at this stage. Just a reminder of what they said before this election, calling him a troublemaker, warning that he was a risk to stability in the Taiwan Strait, referring to his previous comments on Taiwan independence. But we will await with bated breath that comment that could come from China and any potential action in the coming days.
Right. Adam, thank you very much for joining us on this broadcast and all those details there.
Thank you.
And now for more on this, Robert Sutter, the Professor of Practice of International Affairs at the Elliott School of George Washington University, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us on this broadcast, Professor. Now, what does this win by the DPP mean for the future of Taiwan?
I think it's an important benchmark in where we're going with Taiwan. I think Taiwan's future is good. I think there's been an awful lot of attention to the likelihood of Beijing using military force against Taiwan. I think that's remote in the near term. I think what we see is a situation where Beijing has constraints. Strong military action, which would lead to U.S. involvement, is something that really seems to be out of the question at this point, because Beijing is preoccupied with a whole range of other issues. Their military doesn't look very strong these days. Lots of corruption reports and things of that nature. And the Xi Jinping, while a very strong leader, has assiduously avoided direct confrontation that would involve America. Very careful to avoid that. Recently, we have patrols with the Philippines, U.S. patrols with the Philippines in the disputed South China Sea. Beijing does not confront that. And I think that's emblematic of the prudence of Beijing. So I think, as the previous report indicated, we will see demonstrations of unhappiness from Beijing. But the danger of war, I think, is very low. It is low at this point. I just think and the other reasons about this, of course, is the U.S. side. The U.S. is very strong in supporting Taiwan. We haven't had such a strong position of support for Taiwan since we broke relations with Taiwan a long time ago. It's quite striking. And this is something that Beijing would have to take into account. And one final point that I would mention, a couple of other points, but if I could just mention one at this point, is that Beijing faces a situation of deterrence. In the past, most forecasts were that if there was a conflict over Taiwan, the U.S. would be on one side, but alone. No one would be with the U.S. Today, that's very different. Today, Japan is much more strongly committed to this sort of position. Australia is much more committed. And then we have the situation where countries like South Korea and the Philippines are much more willing to help in this situation. Plus, we have all of the European powers, NATO and others, who are now focused on what this would mean for them. And they are prepared, and many of them are prepared to take economic sanctions actions against a Chinese attack against Taiwan. That's emblematic and similar to the approach they took to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And so Beijing faces strong deterrence, and as well as very serious and very significant internal difficulties that I think will limit the extent of their outburst or their unhappiness with the outcome of this election.
Right, Professor, you did touch on a few of the points here. Can you also please reflect upon what the ruling party's victory's implications for Washington and the implications for the Asia-Pacific region will be?
Well, I think we can expect continuity. This person was the vice president under the previous president. She had a very carefully constructed approach for dealing with Beijing and dealing with the United States. and others as well. And so I think now President-elect Lai is going to follow that. So this is very sober. This is another element dissuading Beijing from taking action now. That is, Taiwan is not going independent. That's over. That drive to do that is too dangerous. And the political consensus in Taiwan is we are not going to vote for a president that wants to do that. And so for Beijing's point of view, what does that mean? Well, it means the worst isn't going to happen in Taiwan. They're not going to go independent. And so they could wait. And rather than take a very dangerous attack of military confrontation with the United States. So on the U.S. side, I think this is a good thing. This keeps the situation under control. The Biden administration, I think, is carefully managing this issue, and I think it's doing a good job in the context of their one China policy, very strongly supporting Taiwan, but avoiding breaking the understandings with Beijing that would leave Beijing with no choice other than to attack Taiwan. And so they're very careful to avoid this conflict type of situation. And I think Mr. Lai will stay within that parameter. One point I would add is that the legislative yuan, the Congress of Taiwan, the vote there is that the ruling party is no longer the dominant party in the Congress, in the legislative yuan. And they have to therefore cooperate with the opposition to get legislation passed. And they could run across some difficulties in doing that. So it's not as easy for them to take any sort of action, even if they wanted to, that would be very disruptive of relations with Beijing.
Professor Robert Sutter, thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast and your valued insights.
Thank you.